Angelo, I think that's a great transition because as you have obviously seen, as we have seen over the past 5 years, and this obviously relates to, some of the hypertensions that have existed, especially with the recent city commission race. Can you talk about how detrimental this hyper-partisan divide that we are living in today, where people are literally at each other's throats? They are not trying to find any reason to find common ground. It's like, you're on that side, I'm on that side, and that's it. The line's in the middle, and I ain't crossing it no matter what.
It's sort of like an out of body kind of an experience for me because I turned 62 this year. I know it doesn't quite look that way.
Definitely not.
I turned 62 this year, and for most of my life, I lived in an America that's decidedly different than the one we have today. I haven't really looked at even one day in the current century as being even close to the America that I remember. And there was always a partisan divide. And you go back historically, and it's a partisan divide. But there was a line that was drawn: family, country, faith. There were certain lines that were drawn, and from there on, we were required to come together and solve these problems. You'd have folks on the far left and on the far right making arguments, and they were required to go into a room, close the door, and then they'd come out with a deal, because that's what nobility in government is about. Sometimes you don't get the whole thing, you don't get the whole loaf, but you come out with a solution. And tomorrow you go at it again, and the next day you go at it again. And sometimes the best you can do is come up with a solution that's 80%, but that's a win for everybody, because most people are in the middle. Most people see the benefit when folks are arguing and on either side. Most people don't want to be overtaxed. Most people want a government to work, but they don't want to see misery on the streets. They don't want to see homeless people. They don't want to see kids that can't afford to go to the doctor. There's no place for that in the United States. So we have heart tugs from the right and the left. The majority of people are sort of there in the middle, and that includes a whole bunch of Democrats, and includes a whole bunch of independents, and a whole bunch of Republicans. It's not a question of the label. It's a question of what's in your heart. My parents are a perfect example. My entire family was Republican. But if you'd ask them, is it right that people shouldn't have health insurance? They'd say absolutely not. Nobody should be in a position where they can't do that. Should it be that you can't afford to go to college? What do you think about 13% interest on a student loan? They would say that's outrageous. And we have situations like that, and I don't see why government can't play a role in dealing with those issues. It's capriciousness to say that government can't deal with it. Of course we can. We've done it more than once. But if your viewpoint is to sort of place a caricature, if you will, on the argument of my friends on the right, if you feel that there's a certain Darwinism that exists, that as Governor Cuomo used to say, not the current one, his father,
Mario.
He used to say the other side feels that the wagon train can't get all the way out west unless the weak are thrown off the train. Survival of the fittest, a certain Darwinism exists. He says, well, on our side of the aisle, we believe that the wagon can make it all the way with the family intact, and we've done it more than once. He's right. You go back in history, and you see people like Franklin Roosevelt raising himself out of a wheelchair to kill Nazism and the threat, the horrible threat in the world. And now we see kids running around, with swastikas and whatever. They don't even know what they're talking about. You got people calling things socialism. They don't even know what socialism is.
Yeah, right.
And the way that word is being thrown around. there's no reason why you can't be a good capitalist and not be a harsh son of a bitch. You don't have to be. You don't have to be. You don't have to be the kind of person who has to tread on the misery, who has to live on the misery of others in order to be a capitalist. That's not what good capitalism is about. We used to have companies that took care of their workers, and they cared about their workers. Yeah. And now that's all falling apart. So you asked me a question: what's going on? Now I can also talk to you about how paradoxical it is that in today's day and age, we're surrounded with information because of the internet, and yet we have never had a more misinformed population than we have right now. And it's because you just don't know who to believe. There wasn't much about Trump and his rhetoric that I liked, but there is such a thing as fake news. The problem is he was behind a lot of it, but there is such a thing as fake news, and you hear fake stuff on the right and the left. Where are the ethics in journalism to make sure that we get the straight story so we can make up our own minds? I don't need anyone telling me how to think. You don't need anyone telling you how to think. Just give me the facts so that I have the tools to use my own mind and reach my own conclusion. Well, so that's why I think these arguments get pent up, and then it becomes a capricious fight of, no, you're not gonna outsmart me, or you're not gonna win over me. So it becomes like color wars. It's childish and stupid. And what it does is it inevitably puts nation, family, and faith second to other considerations. And that's not America at its best. That's America at its worst. And we need to stop doing that.
I think that's a great transition, Angelo, because Jen and I both agree that the biggest problem that we face in the political arena is corporate special interest money have completely usurped the democratic process. It is very difficult past what you have done, which has been, like I said, remarkable in terms of your ethic to get out there and meet as many people, knock on as many doors, and that has proven to be fruitful. Not everybody's doing that or willing to do that, but I do think that corporate money has completely corrupted the political system. That includes the information, as you alluded to, that we get when it comes to our news, when it comes to the politics of divide and conquer. And frankly, we see it with a lot of our elected officials down here, whether it be local, state, or federal. And I do think that issue, probably more than any other, is what has created this massive divide, because there is somewhat of a citizens' uprising that's happening. People are aware that something's wrong, but they're getting a whole bunch of bad information in terms of why that is. What's been your experience like dealing with, let's say, the land developers who will just stuff as much money as possible into candidates or elected officials' coffers?
How do you stay clean? How do you keep it so that you're serving people and not special interests and corporate interests, which is down here mostly it's developers, or fossil fuel or whatever.
If you read the Matthews book on Tip O'Neill, who was a great Speaker of the House,
yes.
Speaker O'Neill used to talk about how money was the mother's milk of politics, and how the only way to be a good public servant was to be an ingrate and get away with it. I'll be honest with you. I've run probably about 10 campaigns now, and I've collected an awful lot of money, and I've never felt once that I wasn't free to vote my conscience. And sometimes I agree with the business community, and sometimes I don't. But you can always be honorable about it. I think the business community, what they want in an elected official isn't just someone who votes for them, but who will return phone calls and tell them the truth. If you tell somebody, look, I can't be with you on this one because of X, Y, and Z, they can respect that and move away. Now, some of them will say, well, then I can't support you. And if that's their view, well, then you part company, because that's what ethics requires. But I've actually now, some folks will say, well, he's lying. I'm not lying. I've never come across that problem. I've just never come across the problem. Uh, I can talk to someone who I disagree with and explain myself in terms of why, and if they really feel that they don't want to be associated with me anymore, that becomes their choice, not mine. But campaign finance reform only works if there's public financing of campaigns, because campaigns have to be paid for. The handouts and the radio ads and the TV ads and your staff and everything. There are costs associated with that. So unless we're going to go to an oligarchy where only the rich can afford to run and fund themselves, or unless there's going to be public financing of campaigns,
well, that's what we support,
which exists at the federal level, but doesn't exist anywhere else. And here's the problem: that would actually work across the board in government. People think that it would cost them money, and that would actually save them a ton.
Yes.
Here's the problem. The problem is, Counselor, is you've got the First Amendment, and the way that it's being interpreted right now is not only a difficult political argument, but it's a difficult one to defeat. The truth of the matter is, we tax corporations in our system. We would never be able to afford to live in this country if we didn't tax corporations.
Correct.
So they feel that they have a voice to share in return for the taxes that they pay. Otherwise, they're being taxed without representation.
Yeah, and they're not people. See, that I disagree with this. I disagree with that decision. Okay. I actually don't think that they are people, and I think that's a problem.
Yeah. We were taught in law school that corporations are persons, but I understand what you're saying. I see the room for reform, but only if people decide that this is what they want to do. There are three things that we need to do to make a better democracy, and one of them is decide what we're going to do with campaign financing. The second thing is have absolute and totally open ability on everyone's part to vote, and the third thing is to deal with districting. If we did those three things, and if we did those three things well, you would have people elected who would not be beholden to anyone but who elected them, coming from districts that wouldn't slant viewpoint either ideologically or on any other scale. They would simply represent blocks of contiguous, connected, let's call them, areas of interest, and people would be voting in high numbers. Until something along those lines happens, ours is going to be a challenged society. But the Constitution tells us that our job is to create a more perfect union, and I think that in that acknowledgement, the founders are telling us that what they created wasn't perfect. And this assumption that the original Constitution is sort of like the Bible. No, this was a bunch of guys who happened to own land in the late 1700s who were in a very sweaty room and had to come up with something. Now, bless their brilliance, they came up with an amazing document that has held this country together in large parts for a long time. But they had to make some horrifying compromises in that document. I won't mention them all, but some of them were very horrifying.
Oh yes.
And our job is to make it relevant. And so this is a conversation that needs to be had. There are many sides to the question. There are many issues to be decided. But in the meantime, just because we have corporations involved in campaign finance, that's not an excuse for mediocrity at the local, state, county, or federal level. We need to work together as good public servants and solve the problems of the people that elected us. And I've always been that kind of a guy. So, we'll see how the future unrolls.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.